Many thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this week's video. Ever wonder why your landscape photos look soft and lifeless even when you're using a tripod, a sharp lens, and say shooting at the tried and true f11? It's frustrating, right? You double check your composition, your exposure looks good, but when you zoom in later, it's mush. And here's the kicker, it's probably not your lens or your technique, it's your autofocus settings. You see, most beginners, and honestly even some pros, let the camera decide where to focus by using all focus points active, or worse, leaving your camera in the wrong autofocus mode, which is designed for sports or wildlife or other fast-moving genres of photography. And the result? Your camera locks focus on the nearest object or picks a completely random spot, and your sharpness falls apart where it matters most. In this video, I'm going to show you the single biggest autofocus mistake that could ruin your landscape photos and how one quick settings change can instantly improve your images. It's the exact method I use for every single landscape photo I take, from wide open vistas to intimate telephoto scenes. And once you see it, you will never, ever trust your camera's default autofocus settings again. And I'll also share a simple pro tip at the end that'll guarantee sharp results every time, plus how to set it up in your own camera at home step by step. So to jump right into it, the big autofocus trap. See, when you get a camera out of the box, a brand new camera, more than likely that camera is set to where all autofocus points are active. See, one of the biggest features in new cameras today is how many autofocus points it has. 300, 400, 500, 600 autofocus points. So the default setting of a new camera is usually to use every single one of those focus points. It makes sense, right? You want to use them all. You paid good money for all those focus points. Why not use them? That works for many genres of photography, but not landscape photography. This is a good example right here. By using every single focus point on my camera and most cameras are designed to look for something that is in the immediate foreground right through here, or areas of contrast, or areas that are moving. So in this particular scene right here, the camera is going to focus on this area of vegetation all through the foreground right through here, because this area here is substantially closer to the camera versus this area, the river here, or the mill, or the fall color, or the mountains in the background. All of this area here is just within a couple feet of the camera. So the camera is going to lock focus there. And as you can imagine, that if I were to focus right through here, the mill's gonna be soft, the trees are gonna be even softer, the mountain's gonna be even softer than that. The only thing that's gonna be in sharp focus is going to be this area in the foreground right here. Here's another example of that. Like I mentioned a few moments ago, cameras are designed to focus on things that are closer to the camera itself, areas of extreme contrast, areas that are possibly moving. This is a good example of running water, where the water, of course, is very close to the camera right through here. Also has a ton of contrast in it as well. And since it's close to the camera, it's moving and has a lot of contrast, the camera is almost always gonna lock focus right on there, which, as you can imagine, just like in the previous example, if I were to focus right here, all of this area right through here would be gradually softer. That is not gonna be the best place for me to focus in order to get the entire scene in sharp focus. So most cameras, right out of the box, the default setting is usually to have every single focus point active, and that's possible in the camera. And usually that focus setting is set to continuous autofocus, which means your camera is constantly hunting for things to focus on. So this is a good example here from Patagonia from a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago. If by using every single focus point that my camera, my Nikon Z8, has available and leaving it in continuous autofocus, my camera is going to sit here and hunt constantly, because all of these things, these leaves were bouncing. There was a little bit of wind. These leaves and these branches are very close to the camera. This rock is fairly close to the camera. These leaves were moving around. This is close to the camera. The continuous autofocus, using all of those focus points, is looking all over this scene on an area to focus on. And for landscape photographers, we're trying to usually get the majority of the scene in sharp focus. Not always, it depends on the particular scene, but for the most part, we want things to be generally sharp from the foreground and mostly into the background. A little bit of focus fall off is okay, but we want to get most things in focus. If you don't have control of exactly where your camera focuses, you're going to have a really hard time getting your images as sharp as you want them to be, which was the case in this scenario right here. So what is the big fix? For one, it's really just two main settings that you want to change. The pro tip at the end is kind of the third caveat to this, but to really help you out, The first thing you want to do is get your camera out of continuous autofocus and put it into single autofocus. This could be called single autofocus. It could be one-shot autofocus, just depending on the brand of camera that you are using. And this is a good example of that. By me being able to tell my camera exactly where I want it to focus, I don't have to worry about it hunting all over the place, because if you look at this scene and based off of what we just discussed, more than likely, my camera is going to try and focus on this area down here. There's a lot of contrast here in this reflection, a lot of contrast on this side of the reflection, a lot of contrast right through here. If I was using every focus point in continuous autofocus, it's going to be looking all over this area here for an area to focus on. And that is not going to be the best place for me to focus on to get everything in sharp focus, from the reflection to the land, the trees, and the mountain in the background. So getting your camera out of continuous over into single point or single autofocus is definitely a huge portion of this to improve your sharpness. The second part is to not use every single focus point available to your camera and refine it to a very small area. I actually like to use a single point, and I'll show you in just a moment, but just a very small area. And then I move that area throughout my scene so I can tell my camera, A, exactly where I want it to focus, and B, I don't have it in continuous autofocus. It's gonna lock focus on that one place I tell it to one single time, single point autofocus, and then after that, it will not do a single thing until I tell the camera to. So in this particular scene, I focused roughly about 1/3 of the way into the scene, right around here, really where the reflection started. And I was able to get the mountains of the reflection in sharp focus, the land itself in sharp focus, and the mountains in the background in sharp focus. And that's a good kind of rule of thumb, is just basically, if you're shooting it at higher aperture, say f11 through f16, and you don't have something extremely close to your camera, I mean within a few feet, the closest foreground item is more than 3 or 4 or 5 feet in front of your camera, you can usually put your focus point about 1/3 of the way in the scene, and you're gonna get everything in focus. This is a fantastic example from the Smokies from my workshop a couple weeks ago, where if I had every focus point active and I had it in continuous autofocus mode, it would be picking up on these little leaves right through here. And this right here, as you can tell, this area here is substantially closer to me than this area back here. But by using single point autofocus, only allowing my camera to focus one single time and me determining where I want it to focus, I place that focus point about 1/3 of the way into the scene, which is roughly on this rock right here. I put my focus point here, I focused the camera, and it only focused one time on that exact point and took that image. And using f11, I was able to get the rocks in the foreground here sharp and everything in the background perfectly sharp as well. So those two settings changes, switching from continuous autofocus to single point autofocus, and not using every single focus point, and making it a very refined area. Like I said, I use a single point autofocus, which is a very small area, because I want to be able to have control of exactly where that camera starts its focus plane in all of my photos. And that's very, very important for landscape photography. Now, one of the biggest mistakes people do on location, I see this all the time, is that they don't review their photos after they take them. So I always tell people on workshops, take your photograph, review it on the back of your LCD, and then zoom in and check critical areas of focus. Critical areas of focus are not necessarily the left side of your frame or the right side of your frame. It's going to be the bottom of your frame through the top of your frame. So look at the area in the foreground, look at the area in the midground, and look at the area in the background. And those are going to be the areas that you want to check for focus. If your foreground is sharp and your background is soft, you need to make a focus change. If your background is sharp and your foreground is soft, you need to make a focus change there, whether that's a higher aperture or you need to move your focus point to a certain area, or I should say a different area of your image. But being able to review your photos and zooming in on the back of your camera, that will save you so much time, because you don't want to realize a photo is soft in the digital darkroom when you're at home, because obviously then it's too late. You want to be able to realize that something is soft in your image while you're on location, so you can go ahead and correct that. And this is a good example of that. If I just let my camera focus on these leaves, these leaves would have been perfectly focused, but everything back here would have been much, much softer than I wanted. I wanted everything, all of these leaves, to be sharp focus from the foreground all the way through to the background. Here's a very good example of this, also from the Smokies. I had my camera in continuous autofocus mode. I had all the focus points active. I even had animal detection on, And my Z8 was still really struggling. This was a difficult scenario where I was kind of shooting through this opening of these leaves, but it kept grabbing the leaves here, or grabbing over here, or grabbing this tree trunk, because photographing a black bear is a little bit difficult. So it was really picking all over everywhere through here. So I switched it into single point autofocus, a very small focus point. This bear was just sitting in the tree, and I put the focus point right on him, and it nailed the focus, and I was able to get all of this area softly out of focus, but the tree and the bear tack sharp. So being able to have that control of not letting your camera focus constantly and being able to tell your camera, I only want you, camera, to focus on this one particular spot one time until I tell you to refocus again. That is huge, and that is really going to help you get sharp photos much more consistently, as the case was in this scenario right through here. Now, a final pro tip, and then I'll show you exactly how to set this up in camera, is whenever you focus your camera, here's that small focus point right here that I use, and let's say you focus on an area right there, and then once it locks focus, then if you turn your focus ring, that will enable focus peaking, and you can see how areas are getting a little bit more red, and the more red there is, the more that area is in focus. So although autofocus systems on cameras are absolutely incredible today, from my experience, you can usually refine it in dial it in just a little bit further by focusing with the autofocus system. That lets your camera do about 95% of the heavy lifting. And then you can just make a couple very, very tiny manual focus adjustments to really, really dial it in. You don't have to do it in every single scenario, but from my experience, that is a great way to just get that focus dialed in just a little bit more. And it really, really does help a lot. Now, as far as how to set all this up in camera, obviously, every camera is a little bit different. For my Nikon Z8, basically what you want to do is you want to go to your menu, over to your photo shooting menu area, and then look for focus mode. That focus mode is generally going to be either three things. It's either going to be your manual focusing, it's going to be continuous autofocusing, or AFC, autofocus continuous, or AFS, autofocus single. So I always want to switch it from autofocus continuous, and I want to put that into single mode, basically telling my camera to focus only one time until I tell you to refocus again. The next portion is the autofocus area mode. I like to put that on single point autofocus. And if you have never been in this area of your camera, you'll see how many different focal areas there are in your camera, from super wide, the entire screen, to medium size, to single point, to pinpoint. I mean, the sky is really the limit. I don't use pinpoint because I find that is almost too small. But just a single point autofocus, every single camera out there has one, regardless of exactly if it's bigger or smaller. It is going to be a fairly small point, but that is definitely going to help you out as well. And then if you want to enable that little pro tip, you basically just want to come over to some kind of a custom settings menu. And for me, if I come over here to focus and I go down to something called focus peaking, you definitely want to make sure that the focus peaking display is on. You can usually change the color of the focus peaking. For my camera, I could do red, yellow, blue, or white. I like to just leave it in red. It's easier for my eyes to see. But you want to make sure it's on. You want to pick your color. And then that is really it. And then what that's going to, I should say this, manual focus ring and autofocus mode. That is really important because you want to be able to manually adjust or refine when your camera is autofocusing. That's going to give you the ability to focus on something and then turn that autofocus ring, and that's going to enable the focus peaking. So those things right there help me to get super sharp photos every single time. I used to really struggle with this years ago when I first got started. I never understood why my photos weren't as sharp as I thought they should be. And this right here has really solved that. I don't even think about sharpness anymore. I just always, everything just becomes very natural. But these camera settings here, these autofocus settings and manual focus settings, enable me to get sharp focus from the foreground to the background without me ever having to have any angst or anxiety that the image is going to be soft. So I hope that that information was also helpful for you. And before I do wrap things up here, I do just want to say a huge thank you to the sponsor of this week's video, which is Squarespace, who I use for all of my website and e-commerce needs. Squarespace offers a stunning, user-friendly platform to build your website. With their Blueprint AI design system, you can showcase your photography and create a standout online presence with ease. Plus, built-in Squarespace SEO tools help your site appear in more searches, making it easier for the right customers to find you. And if you're looking to sell online, Squarespace's online store feature provides everything you need to sell your physical goods, digital content, or services seamlessly. So if you're looking to start a new website or possibly upgrade your current website, check out squarespace.com/Mark Denney for a free trial and 10% off your first purchase. So if you have any questions about anything covered in this week's video, please leave those in the comments section below, and I will do my best to get back in touch with you as soon as humanly possible. And if you did enjoy this week's video, if you could give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed already, and as always, I really do appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to spend it with me here today, and I will see you all next Wednesday. Bye.